I just want to talk about this movie, The Dawn Wall. It affected me quite deeply a few months ago when I watched it. It's about a character, and his name's Tommy Caldwell. He's an incredible climber, but he overcomes an attack when he's a young man. He's a climber, like rock climber, like he scales walls and stuff like Spider-Man, except he doesn't have all the sticky web stuff. And so he climbs these walls and he ends up in Kyrgyzstan. And the story of this movie starts with him in Kyrgyzstan, and he ends up climbing this wall, but what happens is there's civil war. He gets captured by some rebels, and at a very young age, he has to make a decision. Do I push somebody off the wall that's going to kill me, or do I allow them to kill me? He makes the decision to push a man off the wall, ends up saving himself and his friends, but has to live with the fact that he pushed somebody off a ledge and killed them. Tommy also, at one point, he's a climber, that's his vocation, cuts off part of his finger and has to learn how to climb on one hand with 4 fingers, not 5. Tommy also has this dream, and the dream is to climb this rock called El Capitan, okay? I don't know why I said it like that. Don't care, okay? He climbs this wall. You might have seen another movie, Free Solo. The Free Solo is about Harold, whatever his name is. It's an Eric. He climbs this wall without a rope, okay? It's quite impressive. The difference between Tommy and Eric, though, is Tommy chooses to do it with somebody. Tommy chooses to do this with somebody. And there's only one person in the whole climbing world that says yes to him. And his name is Kevin Jorgensen, who is an average climber, but says yes to going on the road with Tommy to climb this impossible wall. Now, tackling this wall takes them 7 years of preparation to learn all the different feelings of the wall, to understand vertically how challenging it is, but also how to scale it, how to understand how to manage energy. It was the unclimbable wall on earth that they chose to tackle. And it took them 7 years to map out a route. And for us in our lives, there's things that we have thought to be impossible, that we have faced walls that everyone else says is impossible. Forgiveness, reconciliation, unity. These are some of the ideas that we face. But what about some of the other things? School, education, starting your own business. Maybe it's even politics. Maybe it's starting a church, a podcast, dealing with the darkest area of your life, traveling on international missions. Maybe it's starting a community organization, starting a small group, serving on team. There is a wall that many of us face. And if we're not careful, we allow the fear of the wall to suffocate the purpose that God has called us to live. And in anything that anybody has ever done of significance, there has always been a tremendous wall facing them. There's always been adversity. There's always been challenges. There's always been difficulty. And if you're part of the church, that is a part of the church. There's always been adversity to ideas. There's always been challenges of your faith. There's always been opposition. What makes us think that life is any different now? It's because we believe somewhere in ourselves that there's an easier road to achieving something great. And the news is, and it's tough news, is that success, especially in gospel-centered success, comes with a terribly hard amount of work and reliance upon the grace and the Spirit of God. But what is the wall that you face? What is that thing that people tell you is impossible? Because I'm standing on a platform that people told me was impossible to stand upon. A part of a church movement that people say is dying in Canada, yet we're seeing more and more people come to see the person of Jesus for who he is. And on this story, in this day, as we jump into the story of Tommy Caldwell and Kevin Jorgensen, the only person who said yes to Tommy was one man named Kevin. Here begins their journey on El Capitan. Maybe after all this failure, I thought the climb might be impossible, and I started to think I wasn't good enough. I want to speak into the space of accomplishing the impossible, accomplishing the dream, or living out the Christian faith that we're called to live out. You see, we hear a number of different things in this clip. We all love people who are dedicated. But where are the lines between dedication and obsession? After years of effort, he said, we didn't feel any closer to our dream. And after all this failure, I began to wonder, was this climb impossible? If I may be so bold, as I hear this language over and over and over again come up in various different forms. It can be relationally, it can be, like I said, when it comes to starting something new, it can be the fear that holds us back from taking that step. But somewhere along the line, we don't want to be Tommy. We actually don't want to try and fail. And so therefore, many of us never take the step to try. But today I want to encourage you in 3 ways of steps that you can take today, and just things that will help you as you begin this journey, or as you are facing a current wall, or as you are facing a current crisis, as you're wondering, can I take the next step? There's a few things I want to encourage you today. As you are in that space, as you maybe want to take a step, maybe some of you are with analysis paralysis. Maybe some of you are like, I don't have enough in the bank. Or maybe some of you are like, I don't know, this might just seem like a pipe dream. But God has certainly called you to it. God has purposed you for it. And you're kind of on the cusp of it. There's 3 things that I want to encourage you today in. And this is the first one. And yes, I'm going to do some preacher speak today, so I hope that's all right with all of you. Count the cost before the cost discounts you. Like, I want you to hear that. Count the cost before the cost discounts you. When we start our journey, especially our journey of faith, do you know Jesus actually challenges us to count the cost of our Christian walk? It's not just something we pray a prayer in a service and then we walk away. He's like, do you understand what comes with all of this? And in Luke 14, verse 28, Jesus says this. He says, suppose one of you, maybe one of you, right, wants to build a tower. Like, you want to do something great. In particular, he's talking about the Christian spiritual walk. If you want to build something with your life, like, you don't want to just sit in the back row of church and just exist as a Christian. Like, you want to make a difference with your life, which you're called to do because of Jesus. He calls you to do something with the gospel that he's given you. So if you want to do something with that, if you want to build this tower, won't you first sit down, it says, and estimate the cost? Estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it. And understand, I'm like that guy that likes to do things really quickly. I get an idea in my head and I'm like, let's do it. Right? Anyone else in the room? That's a great idea. Let's do it right now. Right? Oh, Des, we should renovate this room now. I end up in Home Depot in some aisle, right? Come home. She's like, what are you doing? I want an arcade machine. So I built one. That's what I did. It is a true story. I can be impulsive, and you know what I need to learn to do is count the cost. But there's an adverse side to that. Some of you have counted the cost, and God doesn't look nearly as powerful enough as you put him. God doesn't look nearly as strong enough to accomplish that vision. And what you've done is you've said, you know what, the cost is too high, it's too great, and my God is too small, and you need to call the audible. You keep saying it's external pressures, but what you've done is you've said, you know what, I don't know if God's going to deliver for me. And we just got to call it out for what it is. Because then it's a very easy way for us to say, well, then is God more than what I see? Is God more than what I'm facing? Will I be enough? We think about things like this, right? We think about when we want to accomplish a goal and we're counting the cost. We ask ourselves, will I be enough? Do I have the durability that I need? Will God see me through this? What if people see me as a failure? And it's interesting how often God calls us to something, and what actually discounts us is ourselves, rather than counting and banking on the goodness and the supply and the provision of our God. I am guilty of this. So counting the cost is good. Count the cost of the journey. Count the cost so it doesn't discount you. Right? Like many people don't know this. But Destiny and I, when we planted the church, we saved up a year's salary. So I didn't take a salary for Center Church for the first 14 months. That's how we started. We counted the cost. We saved up for the cost. And you're here as a result of that decision. Now, I'm not inflating my ego. Trust me. There's no ego in set up and tear down every single week anymore. You laugh, but it's true. When you're packing a bin, when it rains at the end of the day, there ain't no ego in that. There's still cost. But we counted the cost before the journey. Now, that's a good one that we counted. But there was also good things that come up that try and steal some of our bandwidth away from the things that God calls us to. And so when we count the cost, it also gives us focus. Now, I'm going to give you an equation that's really simple, that's going to help you really define what it is that God calls you to and how you actually can lay out steps to accomplishing it. Do you want to hear the equation? A plus B equals C. You laugh, but you don't do it. A plus B equals C. A, where are you right now? Like what is the state of your life? What is the state of your current spirituality? And then C, where is it that you want to go? What is God calling you to? Like, and I'm talking about gospel things. Like for some of you, the reason you have a certain level of influence, you might think it's just because you're so great, but I think it's that God has actually positioned you to be able to have that influence and leverage it for his kingdom. And I think it's so important for the church to rise at this time and leverage our influence. But here's the deal. A plus B equals C. Where is God calling you to go? So A, where are you? C, where do you need to go? And B is, what do you need to do? Once you lay out that equation, it makes it really simple. The hard work is the C. And the hard work is the A. Most people just start doing B, but what is the C? And what is the A? How do you define the A? We're going to get to that in just a minute. But this is the counting the cost. Counting the cost of saying, I see where I'm going. I see where I am. And B is that I'm counting the cost of what it's going to take for me to get there. Jesus tells us this in the sake of the gospel because it takes work. And as Kevin begins to climb, he begins to realize something. That failure is in front of him. And whenever we set out to achieve something great, whenever we set out to achieve something important, it comes with adversity. But let me remind you of Psalm 34, verse 4. That I sought the Lord, and he answered me, and he delivered me from part of my fears? No, all of my fears. Are you seeking God? Is that a part of your process? Are you asking him, God, what does my A look like, and what does my C look like, and God, help me with my B? I want you to know today that whatever God has purposed in your life, people might mock it, people might say it's impossible, people might say don't shoot for the stars, people might say, are you serious? But seek God, because God will dispel the voices, God will dispel the fears, and God will lift and raise you up. Know that God's grace, his provision, and his plan is far better than your abilities and your work ethic and your experience and your education. That's what makes him God, not us. No, God's provision, God's strength, God's power, working in ordinary people to accomplish great things. Great things for his purposes. So in the midst of our failure, in the midst of our fears, remind yourself, seek God about his goodness, about his grace, his provision, and your plan. A plus B equals C. This is how we count the cost. It's not my equation, by the way. My leadership coach, Michael Sandbrook, is the one that came up with that. But it has so helped me. Why? Because it's helped me identify where I am and clearly identify where God calls me to be, and then help with that A plus B What's it going to take for me to get there? One of the things I love to hear in our church is people that are taking those steps to go to counseling, or people that are taking those steps to go back to school, or people that are taking those steps to get into new friend groups or to overcome certain fears and begin to start the journey, to start new businesses or to start new adventures. I love to hear that. Why? Because I see God birthing dreams and God breathing life into people. And I want to continue to encourage you that despite what you face, yes, count the cost at the beginning, but despite what you face, know that you have a God that fights for you and a God that loves you and will provide for you. As we head into our next clip, they hit a part of the wall that they've never climbed before. They've never climbed it. They had practiced for 7 years and they never got it. And there's this moment where Tommy has a chance to climb the wall. And I want you to see this, that we all face moments where there is a way that we can turn back or we could keep pushing forward. Our first one that we said in terms of accomplishing what's ahead of you is to count the cost before the cost discounts you. But the second thing is perseverance is not a maybe, but a must. And by perseverance, the snail reached the ark. Think about that. That is a Charles Spurgeon quote, by the way. James 1:2-4 says this. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, pure joy. Whenever you face trials of many kinds, that seems a little bit interesting. It seems like you could be a little bit more optimistic there and wish that maybe things didn't come our way. But the writer here understands that the Christian life is not void of pain. Because you know that the testing of your faith, what does it produce? It produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work. Like, don't give up halfway through and not allow perseverance to come through. Because when you let perseverance finish its work, you may be mature then and complete, not lacking anything. And like Tommy finishes his pitch, what is the thing that everyone says? We thought the impossible, now we believe the impossible is possible. Your faith is not just for you. In an age of individualism and secularism, what happens is we become the primary person in our journey, and we forget that there's so many other people around you that are watching your story and watching what God is doing in your life. I had this conversation with somebody recently. I've been writing a little bit, and so I had this conversation with somebody, and she didn't know me from Adam. We just had this quick conversation, and she says, "Josh, don't discount the fact that your kids are watching your story. And when your kids are watching what you're doing, what they thought might be impossible, you are proving to be possible. Do you know that your faith journey is not just for you? That it's not just about being a pastor, it's not just about being a small group leader, not just serving on team, but there are people from all facets of life that are watching your walk from the sidelines, that are watching how you lead with integrity, that are watching how you believe, that are watching as you suffer maybe, or watching as you grieve, or watching your life. And you might feel like you're going through hell right now, but know this, as you persevere, that you are inspiring people around you. Our church inspires me so much more than just preaching on the internet. I'm just telling you. I can listen to podcast after podcast, but when somebody tells me of the difficulty that they're pressing through and believing and trusting God in, man, something ignites in my life. And I believe that that is the power of the testimony. So don't discount that people are watching you. Let faith produce perseverance, which then produces maturity and wholeness, completeness. Now you might be like, what is faith then? Is faith self-confidence in self? Like I need to put a smile on my face all the time, say everything's good, tell myself, I'm awesome every single morning? No, faith in this context is illuminating the person of Jesus and being so, letting your imagination be so full of Jesus and your heart so full of Jesus and your spirit connected with God's spirit that you're full of who he is. And out of that confidence, we have perseverance. It's not just about puffing ourselves up, but getting a glimpse of who Jesus is. If you're like, man, I don't got a lot of faith, Learn about who Jesus is, because Jesus is the foundation in which we build our life and our faith upon. And when everything else falls away, maybe our health fades, maybe our relationships change, in all of those situations, the constant in them all is Jesus on the throne. And when we build upon that foundation, we gain perseverance. And then perseverance creates maturity in us. Like when something hard happens, we don't just go, peace it, I'm out. I almost mic dropped there, and I thought that'd be bad. I'll wait till the end of mic drop. Okay, but perseverance produces maturity and completeness. Don't miss that equation. A plus B equals C. Faith, what? Produces perseverance, maturity, and completeness. If you want to know what a mature Christian looks like, you can probably look at some of the battle scars that they wear, some of the difficult things they go through. And I have friends that are facing some very challenging things right now. So many people in our church, and persevere. It's hard, but they're taking that next step, man. And the grace of God is all over their life. Let us make much of Christ so that we can have the perseverance when trials come. And as we see Tommy finally get through the pitch, he inspires people around him. I want to remind you that becoming like Christ is a slow process of growth. You cannot microwave your faith. You can't do it. And you can't just hang around great leaders all the time. You can't just make sure you listen to enough podcasts. You need to actually know who Jesus is for you. Who is he to you? And have you developed that prayer habit? Have you developed a reading habit? Have you gone through contemplation practices? Have you spent time in God's word? Have you spent time in small groups and in relationship with people? Have you done the hard yards? And have you faced anything large yet? Anybody with me? Anyone faced anything? Come on. Some people say, Josh, why do you lift your hands and worship? Why do you sing? Why do you sing? Why do you lift your hands and worship? Because to me, it's a sign of surrender. To me, it's saying, you know what, God? I'm facing a lot of stuff. Our church is facing a lot of stuff, and I sit in the front row in that seat most weeks, unless somebody gets there before me, but most of you don't, okay? That was a joke because you come late. Okay, but seriously, the reason I sit there, the reason I lift my hands, is I recognize that and for me, it's a posture of prayer. As you come in, I'm saying, God, I surrender this service. I surrender our church to you. The situations, God, help us see you clearly today. So, there's no quick process to microwaving your faith. Great faith takes time. Don't grow weary. Don't give up. Let us above all things not grow weary in our pursuit of our Savior. Work as if everything depends upon you. And pray as if everything depends upon prayer. Here we find God's sustaining equation for the work of grace in our life and the pursuit of our call. Work as hard as you can, but pray as hard as you possibly can, both, like it depends upon those things. For we accomplish something. So the first thing I wanted to encourage you with as you are approaching the impossible is perseverance is not a maybe, but a must. And the first thing, is count the cost before the cost discounts you. As we head into this next clip, Tommy makes it, but Kevin doesn't. For many of us, this is the American dream, that we would make it. And what happens is Tommy displays the gospel in such a unique way without himself having a conviction of the gospel. He's saying, although I could have the notoriety of finishing alone, I refuse not to, because there's something far more at stake. No person reaches the top alone. Kevin reached the top because a friend of his refuses to leave him. The difference between accomplishing something within the kingdom and accomplishing something for ourselves is the fact that we surround ourselves with others. And yes, others help us get to the top, but we also help others rise to what God has called them to accomplish as well. Tommy said, I want Kevin to experience this for sure. He says it was a huge victory, but trumped by the fact that Kevin wasn't going to do it with me. I felt alone, and Kevin probably did too. He says going to the top without Kevin was going to be devastating. I'm going to go into full-on support mode. Who in their moment of glory says, you know what, I'm not doing this alone? And as a church, as much as we can have our individual successes, my heart as a pastor and my heart for you, church, is that you would have people behind you that you are encouraging and bringing with you as well. That there are people that you're calling to rise to new levels and new standards. Because in Galatians 6, 2 through 10, this is what Paul writes here. He says, carry each other's burdens. And in this way, what? You'll fulfill the law of Christ. Oh, I thought the law of Christ was just what we know between the ears. I thought the law of Christ was just how much theology I knew or how many times I attended church. No, it's carrying each other's burdens that actually fulfill the law of Christ. If anyone thinks that they are something when they are not, they deceive themselves. Each one should test their own actions. Then they can take pride in themselves alone. Without comparing themselves to somebody else. And now it feels like Paul goes into some doublespeak here, but he says, for each one should carry their own load. Okay, Paul, come on here. You're telling us we should carry everyone else's burdens, and you're saying we need to carry our own load. Here's what he's actually saying. Here's what you need to hear. The first one is this, is that when he's saying carry each other's burdens, what it's talking about there, the word burdens, each one should carry their own load or burdens there. What it means is like a heavy pack that one person cannot carry alone. It's that person that you know needs help and you know they can't do it alone. It's stepping in to help assist them. There are situations in our life where we need help. Is anybody with me? Is anybody with me? You might not agree with anything else I said, but you know that to be true. Is anybody with me? Okay. And so what happens is there's some things in our life that we just simply cannot carry alone, that we need somebody to carry something with. And that's when we need to step in, church. But then it says, but each one should carry their own load. Wait a minute here. That seems like we should just be telling people, deal with your own problems. But that's not what Paul is saying. He's actually saying this. Each one of you needs to know that at the end of your life, you need to give account for your life to God. You need to understand that that is a weight that you alone bear. That you have to stand before God and say, this is what I did, God, with what you gave me. I will not be there with you. Your spouse will not be there with you. You will stand before God and say, this is what I did with what you gave me. So test your work. Understand that individual success, yeah, it's great for a moment, but it's also really fleeting and empty. I remember sitting in a conference a few years ago. I'm way over time because nobody gave me a clock. But I remember sitting in a conference a few years back, and there was a pastor there that said overnight, he was some leadership stuff he shared, and overnight a whole bunch of stuff exploded. He became super popular on the internet, and he felt so empty. He said, this is all the things I prayed for, and then I got it, and it was still empty. And what he realized is that, yeah, we can have individual success, but there's something that's missing in us. Why? Because God created us uniquely wired together. God wired us for relationship. And so who are you supporting? Who is it that you're carrying their burdens? Who is it that you're loving? Who is it that you're caring for? Who is it that you need to be like Tommy and tell Kevin, you can make it through this next little venture. You can actually keep your feet moving. Because if a church, imagine with me, a church that together supports one another and encourages one another in the work of Jesus. Imagine with me for a minute in the middle of your small group, when somebody's like, I don't know if I can take a next step, but you're like, no, you can take a next step because I know that Christ is with you. Imagine with me for a moment a church that sees a community or sees a province or sees a nation even that is on its last legs or feels like I don't know how to take a step forward, and you say, keep going, keep going. Why? Because God is on our side and points people to the person of Jesus and points people to the work of Jesus and says, I will not just have success on my own. No, I'm committing myself to the work of other people. And I want to just challenge some of you today that life needs to be more than just what you accomplish. You need to look around and say, who has also accomplished work around me? And who have I assisted in helping accomplish great work? I just want to say, teachers in the room. Is there any teachers in the room? 1, 2, teachers in the room, managers in the room. 1, good. We're getting there. We're getting to 3 people. Do we have any employees in the room? There are people all around you that tomorrow you could walk into work, or today you could walk into work. And you could change the way they look at things. You could change the way that they think about things. You could pray and you could support them. Don't just focus on what you got. Focus on those around you also completing the work. For life is more than just what we accomplish, but it's what those around us accomplish as well. I just want to say, for the sake of the gospel, keep going. Count the cost, yes, but don't let the cost discount you. Don't forget to count it, and then you end up in the journey, you're like, oh my goodness, how did I get here? Have perseverance. Know that God is with you and for you. And lastly, know that no person reaches the top alone. So you need people, and people around you need people. So be the church. Be the church as you walk out of these walls. Be the church tomorrow as you go to work. Be the church. It's hard, it's challenging, but do it.